Welcome to the Keystone Experience, everybody. We got special guests with us this evening from the Pennsylvania Game Commission. I know I'm going to screw up the last name, so it's Mary Jo Casalena.
Yep, you got that right, Rob. All right.
Wow. So, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. As you were saying before, the turkeys are starting to gobble, and oh my, it's really fun listening to them. They're starting to they're the dominant males are really trying to keep their dominance, and then the jakes they're trying to figure out their voices, and they're trying to figure out their dominance and who's gonna it's all a positioning game right now, right? Oh man, it's cool.
So, let's, I guess we'll start from the very beginning on how you got into being a turkey biologist.
Yeah, actually, so I went to school, for not well for waterfowl and wetlands work. um, and So actually became a waterfowl biologist, up in the northeast part of the state, and 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 then this opportunity came up to be a for the turkey program. And I said to my husband, I said, I really like hunting turkeys. They're my second favorite species, besides geese, to hunt. And and he didn't want to live up in the northeast part of the state, and I wanted to, I wanted a new, yeah, I wanted something different. I wanted a new challenge with the game commission, and here I am. How many years later? That was in 1999. But it all came back to, you know in in high school, in seventh grade. I wanted to work with conservation, and I wanted to be the spokesperson for wildlife because they couldn't speak for themselves. And that's pretty much the mission of the game commission. And I told my mom that I wanted to go to Penn State for my master's degree because I wanted to work for the Pennsylvania Game Commission. and, and be
Wow.
careful what you ask for.
Well, I'm
So
I'm pretty good friends with a lot of the game wardens around here, Mister both the Bergmans, uh, Mister Yusko, and it's funny because I'll text them guys and I'm like, hey, if you guys are still doing a turkey survey, hey, I seen about 35 or 40 of them over here, and you know, I'll go on the thing and I'll fill out the survey and stuff like that. But I'm kind of the same way. I, I'm a bow hunter, and then turkey season comes and everything just goes away. It's nothing but turkey hunting.
yeah, yeah.
And I try to go. I'm actually going to start my Grand Slam this year. I'm going to start in
Wow.
Florida and hopefully get one there and then make my way over to Texas and then Montana and then I believe Nebraska. I think I can't remember. I can't remember
Hmm.
where, but
Wow.
so I want to try to get them all and someday get the what is it? The Goulds? Is that the one that's in South America?
Well, yeah, the Goulds is, in Central America. But there's also a few in Arizona and New Mexico.
Oh,
So yeah, but the chance of getting a permit for one in New Mexico or Arizona is pretty slim pickings. So yeah.
so
Oh,
we were talked a little bit about how the turkeys here are starting to get in their, I guess you would call it their pecking order.
yes. Yeah,
Is
it's
it?
been.
I mean, normally February, March is when they start doing that.
Oh, it it's so variable anymore, with these weather patterns, are so screwy. Um, but it does, but they typically do begin their pecking order type of work on, in their wintering flocks. So yeah, um, but in terms of that, so you have your wintering flocks usually until about mid March. So so usually by mid to late February, they're really starting to get into it. And but now that it's getting to later February and early March, then you should start seeing the gobblers, confronting each other and really chasing each other around more. Um, and then come mid March, that's when you'll start seeing the flocks breaking up. And and right around now, we're almost at the end of February, and like early March, you'll start seeing the males create their breast sponge. That breast sponge will develop, and you'll see their barrel chests begin to develop, and then the flocks break up, and then and then that's when you've got full scale gobbling really starting.
So, do they? Is it normal for them to gobble in, like I was hearing them in gun season in
Oh yeah,
November?
yeah. It's funny because a lot of that has to do with day length, and so in the fall, that the days are changing. The day length is changing, and so you'll have those periods where it mimics. It's the same day length as it is in spring, and you have similar weather patterns. So it kind of fools them, but and so they'll gobble uh, a bunch in the yeah during the gun season, or even during, yeah, maybe towards, really not much in archery season. Sometimes, I mean, sometimes yeah,
I know
because
my
it's
daughter, she does not like where her tree stand is in archery season because the turkeys roost not very far from her, and when they fly down out of the roost, they almost take her out every time they come down past her. And uh,
well,
then come
the
the fall
archery,
season to hunt them, they
right?
don't show up.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say during that there is some overlap there with the archery season and the turkey season. So, but
So
um,
do they? They're not actually breeding right now, right?
oh, correct, correct. Yeah,
Because you
they're not.
hear, I'm
No.
sure you've heard it going to these sportsmen's club. Why is the season so late? You know,
Oh, it's not late. Biologically, the season isn't late. Um, and that's the thing. I mean, just like any species, we have to manage the populations, and we have to allow the breeding to occur before we can allow hunting. And so we have to allow the males to breed the hens, but then the one thing that's a little bit different in Pennsylvania than it is in some of your southern states is that we don't bring the season in until the peak of what we call incubation, nest incubation initiation. So we know that the the peak of, well, about half of the hens are actually have begun incubating their nests right around the beginning of May. So that's why we open the season the first, May 1st. I should say, the Saturday closest to May 1st. So it's going to change every year depending on the calendar, but it's the Saturday closest to May 1st because we know that's when about half of our hens are sitting on and actually incubating their nests. We have so many hunters still in Pennsylvania that we don't want hens to be mistakenly killed, because a laying hen is gonna come into a call.
mm-hmm.
If she's incubating, that's it. She's on the nest. So, and she's a lot less prone to abandoning that nest once she's actually incubating. So it's really to protect the resource. And unlike a lot of your southern states, well, I mean, there's a lot of hunting. There's a lot of hunting in your southern states, but a lot of your southern states don't have a fall season. So we have to be doubly protective because, we shoot, we've been harvesting about 38,000 turkeys on average in the spring. And then we still have, 6 or 8,000, a little less than 10,000 in the fall. So, that's 60,000 plus birds that we're harvesting overall. So that's a big harvest.
Yeah,
So
it
we have
is.
to, yeah, we do have to be conservative.
Now, I noticed the last couple years, I have a deer lease, and I'm down here in southwestern PA, and I have noticed more bearded hens in the last couple years on our property. Is that like a common thing, or?
No, it's not. It's a recessive gene, but sometimes it seems like, and that was happening in an area. I live in South Central Pennsylvania, Bedford County, and that was happening up in Huntingdon County for a few years. We were seeing a lot of bearded hens, and so it's a recessive gene, but it seems like once that, and we don't really know that much about the genealogy and whatnot, because it's not doesn't really have that much to do with management. I mean, we allow bearded hens to be harvested in the spring just because there aren't that many of them, and we're given the hunter the benefit of the doubt. But it does seem to pop up and show itself, become a little bit more prevalent some for a few years, and then it'll die back down. So it'll be interesting. Tell me in a few years, if you're still seeing a bunch. But it also seems to be, it shows up in pockets more.
Yeah, see,
You know.
I'm actually in Westmoreland County. Enough, my deer lease is over in West Newton. So, and
Hmm.
my daughter had taken a bearded hen 2 or 3 years ago, and then it wasn't 5 minutes later. I shot the gobbler that was coming in, so we doubled up, But the
Hmm.
following year, we had 3 or 4 on the property, because the one
Wow.
had she actually had 2 beards. I got her
Jeez.
on trail camera a couple of times, and I just told the guys, I'm like, hey, look, we've all shot turkeys. Don't shoot them. Leave them alone. I want to see them and see how long they go and see if
Yeah.
they actually have poults.
Well, I mean, we have, and that's a good question. We've actually put transmitters on bearded hens, and they do successfully, hatch out. They do successfully breed and lay eggs and hatch. So yeah, so it's still a hen. And the other thing is, once she's a bearded hen, then that means she's an adult. uh, you know so it's, and it's those adult hens that are the ones that are producing the most poults on the landscape. So it is good to save them.
So have we had like normal hatches for the last couple of springs?
Yeah, actually, more than normal. We've had above average hatches. This is the fourth year in a row. So we're really, huh, we're sitting high on the hog right now. it's, I hope we can continue with this pattern. But I mean, we had 4 years in a row where we had bad hatches. We have poor, below average hatches. Um, you know, it's it's hard to predict when we're going to have a good hatch, when we're going to have a. You can't predict when you're going to have a good hatch, when you're going to have a bad hatch. There's
Does
so many
I'm
different.
sure the weather has something to do with it.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. The weather, but you know, like last year, we had a really good hatch, and now we don't have. Well, we have a lot of data, But we have Kyle Smelter. He's a grad student at Penn State, master's degree student at Penn State, and he's looking at he's developed a model where we have all these different variables, right? Because there's so many different variables that affect nest success. You've got weather, so we've got weather data. You have hen condition, so we have body weight at capture, and then of course you have habitat, um, and of course predation and whatnot. But so he's trying to look at all those different factors and seeing you know and then also disease. We've all of the birds that we capture and put transmitters on, then we take blood and take other biological samples, so we have disease prevalence data, um, so we can see if if they've been infected with a different diseases, and if they have co-infection with parasites, and how that affects their productivity. So, and then, look at disease prevalence on the landscape and see, how we can basically help our turkeys to be as disease resistant as possible. But then, another big factor with nest success is, of course, the habitat. If she's got good habitat, and if she's got a lot of cover, because we're finding that hens that have a lot of structure, that hide their nests really well in brush, and herbaceous vegetation. If they have that structure, they can avoid predation, but also when it's raining out, I mean, they got cover, right? It's like an umbrella, right?
Right.
And we found that, and I'm not, we haven't looked at the predation data yet, but some other studies have looked at, predation right after rainfall or during, intense rainfall events. It's We have a wet hen theory, and once a hen, I don't know if you've ever smelled a gobbler when they're soaked. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
they smell horrible.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, I've walked in the I was skiing. Here a little bit of a side story. I was cross country skiing with a friend of mine at Shawnee State Park in Bedford a few years ago, and I said, "Oh my gosh!" I stopped. I said, "Can you smell that gobbler?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "There is a gobbler around here." I said, I can tell. And then all of a sudden we heard woof, 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 and his turkey flew off. I mean, it was one of those, it was like toward the end of winter and it was kind of wet out. And yeah, and he was a soaked turkey and he really smelled. So, there's that wet hen theory that we're looking into, so basically when you've got when the hens are incubating their nests, 28 days of incubation on the ground, day and night, she's got to protect those eggs. And when it's an all day rain event, she can't really get up away from that nest because, the eggs are going to get cold. So if she's not in good habitat, she's getting drenched. And then a lot of your predation occurs at night with your medium-sized mammals that got their nose is what drives them. And if you've got a wet hen sitting on a nest, she's given a lot of odor for a lot of mammals to find her.
So on our property, we would do a little bit of hinge cutting in the fall and stuff like that, and we do leave a lot of areas really thick in brush. I leave them that
Good.
way for the deer bedding, you know, and for them to hide in. And I do trap it hard in that thick, heavy stuff for, you know, our raccoons and our coyotes. You know, right now I'm having more fun night hunting these coyotes this year because I actually switched over from red light to night vision now, and boy, it's a whole different ball game now, you know.
Mm,
And I
mm-hmm.
actually seen last year towards the end of turkey season, I had was calling and had a gobbler answering us, and I had a coyote come in. He come straight in and he went straight to the decoys and he never left. I scared the gobbler away, but I made sure he didn't get to finish what he came in to do. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, I try to
that's
take care of as many predators as possible when we're out there.
yeah. Well, I mean, if the and there, there's predators. There's always going to be predators. But then there's if people have the ability to take care of the predators, that's good too. But when it all comes down to it, she needs that habitat. That hen, that gobbler, they need that habitat. You were also talking about weather. Weather affects not only not only affect nest success, but then it can also affect poult survival and the young birds, the poults. Um, they're they're real precocial. They as soon as they dry off after they've hatched, then they can start moving around and feeding on their own. Um, but those first 2 weeks of life are really critical for them because they haven't developed their flight feathers yet. So
Okay.
they're, so them, the poults and the hen are on the ground 24/7 still, still they once they're about 10 to 14 days old, if they've developed their flight feathers a little bit, then they can perch up on on low hanging branches. So at least you know they're away from some of the mammalian predators. And then as they develop more and more flight feathers, they can go higher up in the trees. But if they so they have to grow real quick. And so their entire diet is really protein. So they're trying to pick up bugs left and right. And when it's a cold, wet spring, you don't have those insect hatches.
Right.
So I mean, they can still grub, but they can't grub like the hen. They can't. These little tiny poults, they can't scratch. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so the hen's doing double duty, trying to scratch and trying to find them, little bugs in the leaf litter. That doesn't really work. They mostly have to be out in the fields, grabbing whatever kind of insects they can find. So when it's cold and wet, then that not only is there not enough food for them, but they have to feed longer and they're not growing as quickly. So they're more prone to predation. Yeah.
What is when she's on the nest? Does the temperature of the eggs determine if it's a male or a female?
Well, there's some research that's being conducted down south on that. And see, most of your turkey research has been done, you know, with state agency monies. And that kind of research doesn't really rise to the top of the priority list for the state agencies, for putting money into it. So we there's a lot of stuff like that we still don't have much of a very good handle on. But it does look like later on in the summer, well, not summer, but later on in the spring nesting season, it looks like a higher percentage um, of the eggs will be males. So the theory is, well, it's warmer out then. So, but yeah, I don't know if that it's still kind of up in the air as to exactly how that the sex of the bird is determined. I do know that So we've been sending a sample of our eggs for, for our 4-year turkey study that we're on the last year of it. This is the fourth year this year. But the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024, we've sent a sample of our eggs down to the University of Tennessee. They're looking at a fertility rate study. And the first year we sent like 238 eggs and those were unhatched eggs from our nests, that, we don't disturb the hens until they've either abandoned their nest or they've hatched their nest. We're totally hands off. We don't even sneak up or anything. We just leave her completely alone. We've got the telemetry equipment. It tells us exactly where that nest is, so we can find the nest. It's a GPS transmitter. But and then last year we only sent 34 eggs, but so almost 300 eggs that we've sent them so far, 100% have been fertile. 100% have been fertilized. I
Wow.
was surprised. I didn't, and that's even, that's adults and juveniles.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that was, but we still have a third year of the study, and University of Tennessee is using eggs from all different states. So at least we know our birds are laying fertile eggs.
So we have, I guess, the subspecies of the eastern, or we are the eastern wild turkey.
Yes. Yeah.
So how much of a, I don't know what you want to call it. Is it a personality difference? Are they than other birds? I don't know what you call that. Uh,
Yeah, behavior. Yeah, I would, yeah, I would, we usually just refer to it as their behavior. Yeah, they definitely seem to be more high strung and more cautious, um, than your Rios and your Miriams. Oh, you'll be finding out there, Rod. Have you
yeah,
ever hunted at anything besides the Eastern?
I hunted down in Florida for
Okay,
the
for the Osceola.
yeah, the Osceola, and it frustrated me more than the Eastern did because that, I don't know, them guys told me those birds are really quiet, and they weren't
Yeah,
kidding. They weren't kidding. They gobbled once or twice in the morning, and that was it. You know,
yeah,
most of the time you had to deal with the hogs. You know,
yeah. I went down. I went down to Florida well, it was 19 years ago. It'll be, it'll be 20 years ago this spring, because I was 7 months pregnant with my second girl, and, and I got invited to this hunt from NWTF, and they just said, "Hey, we want you to join us on a hunt." And I said, "Well, wait a second." I said, "I'm going to be 7 months pregnant. I need it to be perfectly flat." And I said, because I said, it can't be anywhere like, you're not even Western Maryland or New York. And they're like, "No, don't worry. It's Florida." I was like, "Okay, perfect. I'm in." Count me in. But yeah, we got into hogs one afternoon. And that was the other thing too. Back then, uh, oh, that was before we had the all day season in Pennsylvania. And of course, in Pennsylvania you can't hunt on Sundays. And I shot my bird on a Sunday afternoon. I said, "Oh my gosh, this is like blasphemy in Pennsylvania."
yeah, yeah. My first year, I went out to Ohio deer hunting and was sitting in a tree stand, and there was corn 30 yards away, and it was a Sunday, and we're filming, because we do film for this, and I said to the kid that was filming me, I was like, I said, everything we're doing right now, I just feel completely wrong about doing. and I've talked to other guys in the industry like Philip Vanderpool and them, and Philip's like, look, if it's legal to do it in other states, then do it.
Mhm.
He's like, it's not going to change your success. And he isn't lying. I hunted for 7 days, and every
Mhm.
big buck that I seen never came to that corn pile. The does
Oh,
and all the young bucks were, but
yeah.
those old mature bucks, they know that corn's there,
Hmm.
and they know why that corn's there. They don't
Yeah.
get that big being stupid, you
Right.
know.
Right.
And I've noticed that about gobblers too. Like at our
Yeah.
place, we'll feed after turkey season for the deer and everything, but them
Hmm.
gobblers will stay away from the feeders. You know, they'll let
Hmm.
all the young birds go feed, and then you'll see them later on picking the stuff up on the edges. They won't get too close to them feeders that kick on and off. So,
Mm. Hmm.
but
Yeah.
trying to think what else I wanted. The question that the one guy asked me was, what can a landowner in Pennsylvania do to improve the habitat for his turkeys on his
Hmm.
property?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, it all depends on what kind of property you have. But I mean, the ideal turkey habitat is a little bit of this and a little bit of that all next to each other. So um, so we we've said typically 60% wooded and 40% scrub agriculture mix. The ideal is just to have it all right there. So you want your big trees so that they have good place to roost, but also they have some nuts, whether it's acorns or cherries, depending on where you live, or beech, depending on what part of Pennsylvania you live. Um, have a variety of different oaks. I'm always thinking oaks because I'm in Central PA. Um, having have a variety. So your wood lots should be a variety of different species, and but then within your woodlots, you also want to have some horizontal structure, right? You don't want to be able to just look straight, 100 yards through your open timber, um, because predator is going to find a turkey immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So you won't have any turkeys living there. So you want, if you have create some down, if you don't have any timber that's down, just cut a tree here and there. But usually Mother Nature takes care of that with windstorms and whatnot. So keep that horizontal structure there, whether it's from um, downfalls, and you can do that yourself. You can cut trees yourself, but and then allow some of that sunlight in there so you can have some of you know, your bushes growing, whether and hopefully have native species growing. If you have a lot of, um, you know, autumn olive that's starting to pop in, or Japanese, or barberry, Japanese barberry, get rid of that stuff. That stuff is not good for turkey nesting. We've Kyle Smelter at Penn State's finding that, these exotic non-native species hens aren't well hens aren't as successful nesting in those exotic areas where there's the natural vegetation. The native vegetation is better. If it's a bramble of berry, of raspberry, blackberry bushes, oh, that's great. Those are fantastic for turkey nesting, but just for having some cover. And then of course, have those woodlot areas grade into, whether it be agricultural areas or even hay fields, um, something where there's going to be a lot of insects that can grow, that can live. Um, we like to have at least 1 to 2 acre openings, and don't have them in a square pattern. Have them, if you can, have them have the shape a little awkward. Just so simply, like if you're in a square opening, and if you're a predator, you can look straight down that edge and see anything.
Mm-hmm.
So basically it's just trying to, look at the landscape and seeing what a predator is going to see, and then seeing what a turkey is going to see. If you can see straight across your field, then that's not good for a turkey to survive. So if they can, if you're the person who wrote in, if they could create some openings that don't have any straight edges, then that would be really good. And then have that soft edge, like you were talking about, what you do. You have your tall timber, and then you have some shrubs, and then you have, some herbaceous plants, whatever that might be. You can have corn, you can have soybeans, but you can also have just, a seed mix in there, a perennial seed mix. Um, you know, we used to really think that, an entire field of warm season grasses is the best for turkeys. And then we realized, oh shoot, a little tiny poult can't get through that warm season grass field. So having some, just not having it, not having too much thatch. You hear about thatch. Thatch
Yep.
isn't good. And yeah. Um, so having areas that are open enough so that poults can get through. We've been creating some savanna type habitats too. So you can allow some trees to grow up in your fields, so that, um, or even just bushes too. Basically, you just want to have some kind of structure where, your turkeys can run and get catch some cover, from avian predators. So I'm not talking about letting tall trees grow. I'm talking, short trees that a turkey um, can get away from the open field and sneak into some cover. Because yeah, hawks can be pretty devastating as well.
Yeah, we got a bunch of them around here. A
Yeah,
whole bunch of
yeah,
hawks.
yeah,
And
yes.
what I guess what is the major predator of an adult wild turkey? Would it be bears? Would it be coyotes?
So, well, for adult turkeys, um, bears do take nesting hens, but they're they're not. Yeah, they're not interested in gobblers. Um, you know, the a bear, again, it's their olfactory senses. Their sense of smell is really driving them. Just like your possums and raccoons and foxes and coyotes and bobcats, whatever. Um, so so nesting hens, they're subject to all of those predators that I just mentioned. Um, but they're and usually owls. Usually we don't see owls predating incubating hens. Usually, but and I'm saying usually because I have in my mind's eye, I have a photo of a hen that was nesting in a mature woodland, timber stand, and there was no cover. She was just up against a tree, and she got predated by an owl at night. But again, it was open, and there's that's the problem with having open habitat. So yeah, so owls usually aren't killing hens while they're incubating. They usually wait until they're roosted up in the trees with their poults, and that's when they get them. And of course, owls can kill an adult male as well. Because they're they can pick them off on the roost. Um, but then, you know, and then of course, your adult males, they're very prone to predation during the spring breeding season because the adult males are the ones that are gobbling, they're making themselves present, and then they're and then they're, they got their whenever they have their tail fan out, they can't see behind them.
Right.
So that's when you have your bobcats and coyotes, you know, getting them. So it's, yeah,
And I
it's,
did have one other question that somebody sent me.
mm-hmm,
They wanted to know about reaping turkeys in Pennsylvania. I knew that question was going to come up whenever.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So that's illegal in Pennsylvania.
yeah.
It so one way to think of it is, some people think of using, reaping with the tail fan as a blind, and because you're sneaking up on the bird.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two things with that. First of all, a blind in Pennsylvania has to have four sides and a roof, and it has to be, of course, man-made material. So it has to
Mm-hmm.
completely conceal the hunter. So therefore, the reaping, tail is not doesn't conceal you completely. And then the other thing about Pennsylvania is that there's no stalking of birds.
Right.
So, yeah. So, and there in Virginia, there was an incident where, there was a hunter actually got shot by another hunter who was reaping. And boy, you wonder how that happens. But I mean, you think, gosh almighty, that could never ever happen. And sure enough, you know, truth is stranger than fiction.
I
So it is very
remember.
dangerous. And that's the other thing too. I mean, Pennsylvania, we still have 170,000 spring turkey hunters. So there's and we're not getting very much sleep during the spring season. So your
Yeah.
judgment might be a little off. I don't know.
Yeah. I I can remember when I took my hunter safety course back many years ago, the video, and they showed the guy sneaking in on somebody calling, and then the guy, being shot. And I that plays in my head every spring when I go out there. I mean, I hunt on my own property, you know, my own lease, but I do occasionally go out and hunt on public land, and it really, really plays in my head that is this guy that's out here, is he going to sneak up on me, or are they going to, do what they're not supposed to do? And you know, it's something that we all need to pay a little more attention to. Yeah, we hear that gobbler going off. Don't try to go to that gobbler. Try to get him to come to you as much as you can, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, for sure.
And I mean, yeah,
Well,
we're trying to defeat Mother Nature by trying to make him come to the hen, but
yeah,
it works.
yeah. I mean, 37,000 turkeys a spring in Pennsylvania. Yeah, it works. We last year was over 39,000 that we harvested in 2024. So yeah, it definitely works. But it's funny because you said that you hunt on private land, and that I hunt a lot of private land as well. I hunt wherever. Um, I've usually found more hunters trespassing. Well, yeah, of course they're not trespassing when they're on private public land, but I've had, just I guess I have just as much problem with private land than I do with public. And the only time I ever got shot at, um, was on private land. I was on my friend's. Now I was a guest on my friend's hunting club property, and we were together, and we had a hen decoy out. It was the last day of the season, by the way. It was the last week of the season. I don't know if it was the last day. We had a hen decoy out, and some guy, I don't know if you could call him a hunter, but anyway, he's snuck onto the property. He wasn't allowed to be there. It was posted, and he shot at my hen decoy, and the pellets, thankfully, and none of them lodged into me, but the pellets went all around me. So, yeah, and that was a hen decoy. Boy,
Wow.
so, but
Yeah,
that was years ago.
I do use a full strut
Hmm.
DSD decoy, but I never, when I'm on public land, I never take that decoy with me. It's always just a
Yeah,
hen decoy.
yeah,
And
hmm, yeah. That's
usually I'll
good.
wrap a little piece of orange ribbon around her neck. Just, I mean, I haven't noticed it bothering any turkeys when they're coming into it,
Hmm.
but I don't know if it helps keep people from coming to it. I don't know. I've been fortunate enough not to be shot at in turkey season. Not so
Oh, that's
fortunate
good.
during wood duck season, though. I've been shot a
Oh,
couple times in duck season.
wow. Huh.
Yeah.
In Pennsylvania?
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep. Yeah.
I went.
On a crick, you know,
Hmm.
uh, guys were on farther down the creek shooting at wood ducks coming up the creek and
Yeah.
pelting us. I mean, it was, it is what it is. Nothing stung. Nobody got hurt. But,
Mm.
it's just that thing, guys coming in late after you had been there an hour before it got daylight, all set up with your wood duck decoys on the creek. And then, you get them late hunters come in.
Yeah.
So, it is what it is. Nobody got hurt. So,
Yeah. Thank goodness for that. Yeah. Hmm. I know, but
and
yeah,
we,
I'm always hesitant to move. And when I was pregnant, that my same daughter, after Florida, when I was 7 months pregnant, she was born in June 6th. So here it's, in Florida, the season's open in March. Well, here it was May, and and I got to one of my favorite places. This was actually on my a friend's property, um, and I got to this tree, and I was like, okay, I'm parked here. I am so pregnant, I can't move. And that really taught me. I mean, I sat there. Those gobblers, I was hunting along the edge of a field, a hay field, and they would go down the hill and they'd come back up and they go down, and then they finally were just hanging out down out of sight. And I just stayed there for, I don't know, it was probably an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe. And but I couldn't go anywhere because I was too fat. And those birds came back up. And I thought, wow, I've always told myself I have to be patient. And that really taught me. It couldn't have been 2 hours. I don't know. It was probably at least an hour and a half. But there was one turkey that I called him in for 2.5 hours, though. Boy, my butt was sore after that. But yeah. So I've learned over the years that, yeah, if you just stay still, they'll come. Oh, and have you ever done this where, this is before I learned that, you know, I try to call a gobbler out to a field. So, you have your decoy out in the field, and then that darn gobbler stays behind you in the woods. And so then I've done this where I've gone to try to reposition myself, somewhere else, deeper in the woods, and then he ends up going out to the field, and I never took the decoy out. And there he
yep.
was right there at my decoy.
Yep. Yeah,
Oh man.
I had one last year. I had called that bird probably was 9:30 in the morning, and I called to him. It was the last week of the season, and he cut me off every time I called. He cut me off. He cut me off, and he was getting closer and closer and closer. And he finally popped out on the power line. Come all the way down the power line. There's a creek in the bottom. He stopped on the edge of that creek and just stood there for almost another 2 hours, gobbling, and would not cross that creek. And there's a wide open field between me and him. There's no place for me to go. So I got up and walked up over the hill away from him and started calling from the opposite side of the woods. And he went all the way down around the creek and came up the other side. And when he got up there, it was just a jake. I ended up leaving him go because that would have been my second turkey tag last year. And I did not want to use my last tag on a jake. So,
Mm-hmm.
but
I'm glad you brought that up. Talking about Jake versus, a mature gobbler. Um, so, we put bands on, we trap birds in the winter and we put leg bands on them. And then we see what kind of harvest rates we have in the spring. And we got annual survival rates as well. And so believe it or not, the harvest rates of juvenile males, of jakes, is right around 10%, 8% to 10% of all the jakes that we ban. That's how many we get in the harvest. Whereas adults, it's about, somewhere around 30%, 32%, anywhere between 25 and like 35%, depending on what area of the state you're in. I mean, that's a huge difference. That's
yeah,
huge. 8% versus, 30%.
right.
And but it's great because, like you said, that Jake, let him go, because that Jake, they have really high survival. They
Mm-hmm.
80% of those Jakes are going to survive to become adult birds.
Right.
And whereas, you're less than 50% of your adult males, I mean, are going to survive, if you even just get rid of hunting season. So,
How how old do they usually live?
well, we haven't looked at that for this particular study, but the last study that we did from 2010 to 2016, it was only 3 years. The average life expectancy of a gobbler in Pennsylvania was 3 years.
Wow.
So, if you're hunting a 4 or 5 year old bird, they have that, that's a long bird. That's a long lived bird in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania. Yeah. If you get
Yeah.
I mean, I think the oldest harvested bird, the oldest banded harvested bird that we've had so far was a 9 year old bird 9 year
Wow.
old male in Pennsylvania. So,
And
and
what is like the average weight for those guys when they get that old? Do they 25, 26 pounds?
no. I mean, so we're looking at weights right now, and it's different because we're weighing them when we're capturing them in, in January, February, March, and usually, so you can't really, it it it's different, and we don't ask hunters to weigh their turkeys in the spring, um,
Mm-hmm.
but usually, your 2 year old birds are going to be between 15 and 17, 19 pounds. And then your 3 year old birds are going to be 20 pounds. Your 4 year old birds are going to be 22, 23 pounds, is really, really big in Pennsylvania. Um, so if you know somebody who's gotten a bird that's more than 23 pounds in Pennsylvania, that's a
Yeah. I
prize.
mean, I've weighed mostly all mine, and they're usually right around 18 to 19 pounds is
Yeah.
what I've
Yeah.
come up with
Yeah.
most of mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't think I've gotten a set of spurs any bigger than an inch and an inch and an eighth, I think, is my biggest set of spurs.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty typical. Yeah.
And I do have one bird. He's actually the bird I got mounted. He has one beard hair that is almost 14 inches long.
Hmm.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, that's the thing with beards, they grow their whole entire life and they're dragging on the ground, so they're going to be breaking a lot. So, yeah, it's hard to, so that, and that's the other thing too with beard and spur lengths. They can, both of them can be so variable, because it also, for their beard, it depends on how long their legs are too, right? How
Mm-hmm.
much they're going to drag on the ground and break. But then the spur growth also depends on the habitat. If they're a mountain turkey going going on rocks, dealing with rocks all the time, their spurs are going to be worn down a lot more than an agricultural a farm deer, a farm turkey. I mean, so
Right.
yeah, yeah. So
Well, we're
once
just, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, once they get to be more than 2 years old, there's it. We usually can do, Jake's 2 year olds and then 3 years and older. Kind of, yeah. So kind of like deer antlers, they're so variable.
Right. Right. Well, we're rated about that hour, and I know you got other things to do this
Yes,
evening. And
yes.
I really appreciate you taking the time out to hang out with me and talk turkeys. And uh, is there anything you would like to tell the listeners or how they can let you know any information or anything like that about turkeys or how they can get a hold of
Yeah.
you?
Well, there's two things. There's the winter turkey sighting survey that goes from January to the middle of March, and that helps us to know where there's flocks that we can trap to put leg bands on. And I want to let people know that when we trap a turkey, that's all we're doing. We're just trapping them. We're assessing the bird, putting a leg band on them. In some areas we put transmitters on their backs, and then we release them right there, and we don't move them at all anymore in Pennsylvania. We don't move any turkeys. And people say, well, I saw you in there, you trapped birds, and now I don't see them anymore. Where'd they go? And I said, well, they were scared. I mean, we're 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 netting them, and then we're handling them, we're putting this jewelry on them. They're like, yeah, I'm not going to go into that field for a while. So yeah.
Yeah.
So they're still there. So that's the winter survey. And then the summer survey that we do in July and August, that's when we find out what the recruitment was, what, the pulp production is. And that goes into our population model. So that's real important as well. And if you find a bird with a leg band on it, call that, or if you harvest one, call that number and we'll tell you where and when that bird was banded. So that's pretty cool information for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like a waterfowl ban.
Yes. Yep. You get to
Yeah.
keep the band. Yep.
Yep.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
all right. I got to mention some sponsors real quick and then I will shut this all down and let you go.
All right. Thank you.
And I'm still learning all this stuff. So I think this is the one I want here.
That's okay.
Check out these fine sponsors that help this show and make it possible. Apparition Sense, Chico Outdoors, Back 40 Seed Company, Gearhead Archery, Forget Genetics, Trapline Beard Oil, Weeby Knives, Wreck Broadheads, Coon Creek Trappers, Wilson's Wildlife Solutions Baits and Lures, Redline Bow Hunting, Rack and Stick, Scout Tech, Excel Construction and Renovation, Warhead Arrow Company. You can also catch the podcast on Carbon TV, the Outdoor Call Radio, and we will see you guys next week with another episode. Thank you for tuning in, and have a good one. Welcome back to part 2 of Keith. Okay. Now, if I stop recording.